This show is intended for mature audiences only. Viewer discretion is advised.
Hello, humans, and welcome to another episode of Gen X Gamer. That's right, the video game show that is not hosted by an annoying e-beggar. There are no Patreons, no Super Chats. That's right, we just talk about the games we love and how fun it is to hoard them, and maybe a topic here or there. Now, with that said, let's get ready for the show. On today's episode... Hello, humans, and welcome to another episode of Behind the Channel. Today's guest, a man who needs no introduction. That's right. He's a game developer. He's actually a game developer behind one of my favorite games this year, an action RPG, Ampersat. And he's also behind an upcoming game called Crossover Roll for Initiative. I hope I got that right. You might know him best by developing games in a day that brought down a company, the one, the only Gaterooze. How are you?
G'day. Very good, thanks.
Let me ask you this. How did you hold up during the pandemic? You know, this whole ordeal that we all went through.
Well, it was kind of funny. It really didn't change much for us. My wife and I were already at the point where we didn't need to work anymore, and we were just doing our own projects from home. So,
oh, that's awesome.
Yeah, that. So in that sense, it didn't change our daily routine. And we're kind of, I wouldn't say antisocial, but we're not terribly social. So it actually gave us a good excuse to not see people who we may not have wanted to see. So
that's awesome. Yeah,
actually a good thing for us.
Yeah, sometimes humans are overrated.
Yeah.
Let me ask you. Let's start from the beginning. What was your first console, or your first exposure to video games?
Mine was, well, the first, first console was Atari 2600. But before that, we had some Pong machine. I can never remember what it actually was, whether it was an Odyssey or some earlier thing. But I was like 2-3 years old when we had that. So the 2600 was the first gaming real memory.
Oh, nice. What was your favorite game there?
Oh, probably either Adventure or River Raid. I think I played the most. But I mean, as a family, we played Combat a lot and things like that. But they don't really hold up. But River Raid and Adventure, I could play them for hours.
Yeah, I have a copy of Adventure actually still. Let me ask you, as you're growing up, when did you first get that inkling of becoming a game developer? A job that, a lot of us kids back in the day had. We thought, all you had to do was sit in front of a computer like they did in the movies, and you learn how to program in 30 minutes and you were a genius, but it actually takes a lot of hard work. When did you get that first inspiration that you might be heading this way?
Well, not until 3.5 years ago, really. Like as a kid, I didn't really have an interest in developing myself. I mean, the closest I came to it was mucking around with shoot 'em up construction kit on the Commodore 64, where you could kind of fiddle with the sprites and stuff like that. So of course everyone made big penises shooting sperm at enemies.
I got up to the balloon. Well, I think that was the VIC-20. There was a balloon that you can make fly away, and that is as far as I got. Oh yeah, man, that is interesting. So now you started making games as an adult. Tell me about that process, because a lot of us Gen Xers, are going to retire pretty soon. Not me, but a lot of people start looking for second careers. Like in our company, we have people, coming in, starting in something brand new, and they work part-time because they're already retired, but they just want to keep busy. Yeah. How did you start in this?
Well, I mean, game dev is perfect for that situation where you don't have that pressure that, you have to make something that's going to sell and pay your bills. So I think it's a fantastic move for people who are slowing down in life to take up something that still keeps engaged, keeps their mind working. And, a lot of us are workaholics and you feel like you're working, but it's for yourself, doing something that you hopefully enjoy. And that's basically what I did. I mean, I've been on the periphery of the game industry in design and management of developers, but never done any myself. And so it was just it was partly a self-challenge to see if I could do it, and partly just the simple joy of learning how to do new things.
Wow, that that is mind blowing and inspiring for a lot of a lot of people. I don't know how old you are, but you can see how old I am. A lot of people my age, they're like, "No, I can't do it anymore. I can't do this. I can't believe you're still doing that." And like you said, I'm a workaholic. I couldn't see
Hmm.
myself just sitting there, or
Yeah.
just traveling in a ship the rest of my life. And this just makes it more impressive. I didn't know this, and I'm sure a lot of the public didn't know this about you, that you started a short time ago. And I'll get to why later on in the story, but I want to talk about the things that interest me. And I know everybody's I know what everybody wants, but hey, this is my show. I'm going to ask you the questions that I find interesting, right? Which are about games. You created one of my favorite indie games this year. The whole mood, the whole ambience of this game is something that really speaks to my generation, and that is Ampersand. How did you come up with the inspiration for that game?
Well, see, to answer your previous question, I'm mid-40s, so
Hmm.
basically I was 41 when I started learning how to program and develop, and Ampersat was the game that kind of drove me to that. So I had the idea for the game before I started learning how to make it, and it spawns from I used to love the very original Rogue games, which are made with ASCII graphics,
Yes.
and they're turn-based RPGs basically. Um, and I was mad on like Angband and Moria, particular a couple of variants, and I kind of wanted to make that style of game, but as an action game.
Hmm.
So take the RPG elements and the ambience of it, and then make it more like a gauntlet kind of dungeon crawler action game, and merge those two styles together. So
Yes.
that's where it came from.
That the environment of that game, the walls, the
Mm,
towers, everything else. I I really, really like it. When I think of retro reimagined, that aesthetic is really what I think about a lot. But one of my favorite things, guys, and this is one of my guilty pleasures, and I've told them this before. I play the music of the town in the background while I'm working. Sometimes I'm doing math at work, or doing some, working on a computer for a long time, and I just let it play. Where did that music come from? It sounds like I'm in the Shire or something, but it really relaxes me. Where did that music come from?
yeah, that's really cool to hear, actually. So I'm really happy with that piece. Before Ampersand, I'd never composed or played any kind of music whatsoever, um, and I found it really difficult doing that. But it came out really well, I thought.
It
Um,
did. Yeah,
which
absolutely.
is pretty
Absolutely.
funny. And like I've had a bunch of comments about the music in the game, and not just that track, but the dungeon tracks and so on. And it seems to be a real love-hate. Like, I've had a couple who just despised the music, absolutely hate it. They thought there was a bug in the game because the music was so bad. Um, but I have to say about 5 times as many people have specifically commented that they love the music in it.
Yeah.
So that's really heartening to hear that I didn't bugger up too bad.
Yeah, I
But
mean, what I'm gonna do this during the holidays, I'm gonna play it because now it's available on the Switch, I heard, right?
yep, yep, it's on
Yeah.
Switch.
So, and guys, I'm gonna put links down below. I'm gonna even put a link to the demo, right? This is absolute shilling, but I'm telling you, this is a good game. Go play it. So you guys can check it
Thanks for
out.
that.
Um,
And the music, by the way, the inspiration for that particular tune, I'm a big fan of folk rock. So
ah,
like Fairport Convention and especially Steel Eye Span. Um, so it really came from that.
awesome. Awesome. Let me ask you, since you're new to this, what did you find the most challenging as far as bringing this video game to market?
Definitely you hit the nail on the head there saying the market, the promotional side of it, PR, and trying to push the game out. That's really not me. I'm not comfortable self-promoting.
You need a
I
hype
just wanted to
man.
make the thing. Yeah, I need a Tommy, don't I? Tommy
Yeah.
Tellerico. I mean, I had to do a lot of business development in formal life, but that was different. It was more intimate. I was dealing with
Yes.
generals and CEOs of Raytheon and things like that, I could handle that. But doing the mass market thing, completely uncomfortable. My wife helped out, but we said, bugger it, let's not handle that ourselves. And that's why we signed up with the publisher.
Gotcha. Let me see if you could go back, right, in time right now and go back to the start of the project. What will you tell yourself that maybe you weren't prepared for after, you're said and done with this first one?
I'd say it's advice that I didn't follow for my second game, but I would say definitely make smaller games with less content. Because the
Pick up and
fun,
play.
yeah, like when you're making it, the fun part's the start. Like at the start, it's really fun because you're
Yeah.
making new stuff. You're programming your character's movement and the gameplay systems, and it's all coming together and it's all fresh and new. And you do that with a minimal amount of content, whether they're placeholders or just a few things you've made. And then you hit a point where the game is basically there. And all you do from then on is build out the levels, build all the content. And that part can get really boring, to be honest. I find it hard to pay attention for that kind of longer period. And that's why I did the hater games. I needed to get something new out. So that would be the advice. And after this next game, that's all I'm going to do. I'm going to make games that take between a day and a month maximum. No more of these 1 to 2 year projects.
Yeah, absolutely. Now that you mentioned the hater games, and let me tell you, the perspective after you told me how long you've been doing this changed a lot. But first, I'm going to ask you, when did you first hear about the Intellivision? Amico.
It was relatively early. It would have been, I'd say, mid 2019, because it was not long after I started making AmpSat. And I remember hearing about it. And back then, it was still just like $150 retro console. And it was going to be revamping some of these beloved franchises that I liked, Lode Runner and the Bad Dudes vs. Dragon Ninja, R-Type, things like that. And I was pretty interested. I thought, yeah, that's pretty cool. And I even thought, I could put ampersand on it. It would see that system. And then I kind of just forgot about it. I didn't really follow it. But I'd been listening to CE podcasts for years, and they kept talking about it. And at first I didn't really pay attention. And then something clicked. I can't remember exactly what spun it for me, but they were reporting on something like some hypocrisy or lie that Tommy had told on a business sense or the production side of things. And that started getting me really interested. I didn't care about, if someone doesn't like the system or doesn't like the games. That's irrelevant to me. I don't care. But when they started talking about, well, this is a potential financial scam, or that there's issues in the company itself, I'm a big fan of reading about that. For example, the book on Theranos, Bad Blood, one of my favorite books ever. Just fascinating. So I thought this is like a chance to follow a similar kind of story as it's unfolding.
Yeah, and there's a lot of parallels with Theranos. I even made a video, the Theranos hypothesis, but they never got to that point. But let me say this. I mean, for a while there, and I came in when I saw business practices that I was familiar with that weren't adding up. But for a while there, I was like yelling at an empty space, because I'm talking about manufacturing practices. I'm talking about numbers. I'm talking about things that most people find boring, and I'm trying to save people from not investing in this thing because it just doesn't make any sense. They say a picture's worth 1,000 words, but what you did with those hater games, creating them in such a short period amount of time, it really exposed the company. And all of a sudden, it was a different dynamic. With those games, you did more to dissuade people from investing that I ever did in all the episodes that I did. And now that I know that you did it with experience of just starting at 41, so you've been doing this for a short time, and this company had 600 years of experience and couldn't get their shit together. I mean, that really blew the lid off this whole thing. You knew there was something wrong, and that they didn't have the chops to do what they were going to do. Did you expect that kind of impact from those games?
Well, it's funny. I think the impression is completely wrong about those games, and I'll dive into it. But
Uh-huh.
I kind of think I had more impact in a way from like the financial analysis I was doing before those games, like the overviews of the start engine SEC disclosures and so on. They were picked up by all of the big YouTubers and even the media outlets. They basically cut and paste, the TLDR that I wrote for all that. Um, so, in a way, I feel I contributed more in providing analysis,
Well,
the boring stuff, as you said.
uh-huh. I mean, to those people, yes, but to the people that were like investors, that they really weren't subscribing to those people because they saw them as
True.
haters or it was just boring stuff. But when you show a game, you say I made this in a day, and these people have been working on this shit for 2 years, right? And can't get it together. I mean, Joe Public out there looks at that, and
Mm.
then now they can see. Wait a minute, maybe they have a point, right? Because at that point, I had people that I could talk to, and it was like talking to a wall. But after they saw the hater games, you could see them kind of pause and go, "Oh man, that one day, really one day."
Well,
Probably the
see,
the
it's
one that.
funny.
Uh-huh.
It's just bizarre to me because I didn't expect that at all, and it was the furthest thing from my mind when I was making them. Like I literally was just, I was banging away at a certain point in the game I'm currently making, and it was really boring. I was hating it. I had to isolate from a COVID close contact, and I had a sick cat that I was nursing during that time. So I was down in the dungeon and my wife was upstairs. So I just wanted something new to do that day. And I just woke up and literally said, bugger, I'm going to make a game, a 1 day game. And I thought, what will I make? And Astro Smash popped into my head. And then I thought, well, what if I made it based on the YouTubers, the haters, and you were shooting them up? And that was as far as I thought. And it was just, to have fun for that day. Um, so it's kind of strange to me that it snowballed into this thing like you're describing.
Yeah, thank you for including me, by the way.
Yeah.
Have you ever considered putting up physical products, making cases with a code? That would be the ultimate if you ever put those out.
That'd
You
be
would sell
funny. I
those.
mean, anyone's welcome to do it. I think someone made a fake cover for Hater Smash, which was really fun. But yeah, if anyone wants to print one up, they're welcome to.
Oh
I'll let
man,
them.
have you ever actually thought of putting those out as a collection? Because I'm telling you,
Oh, yeah, I had a small thought of making like a virtual arcade where you walk around to arcade machines and each one is one of the hater games and
oh,
you can play them. I did think about that, but we'll see. Never know.
okay. Let me ask you, because it's easy for a bunch of people out there on YouTube land to say this sucks, that sucks, but looking at it as a developer, right? Looking at it as a programmer, um, how do you feel about the job that they did programming? Why were the games were in that state when you first saw them? I don't know what game you saw first that was incomplete, but obviously they weren't complete.
Hmm.
Why do you think that was?
Look, it's tough. I usually don't like commenting on the actual developers
Hmm.
because it's not fair, and people could trash my games, just as easily, and be valid in a lot of it. Um, it's tough to know behind the scenes what was happening. So you can say, this game was incomplete or it had stolen artwork, but you don't know exactly what led to that. So, for example, battle tanks, we don't know if because they're third-party developers, right? We don't know if they just sent a beta to Intellivision to check over for something, and then Tommy thought, oh boy, that's done, and he went and did a deep dive on it. And the original devs might have said, no, you shouldn't have shown that. That was just for your eyes. It still had placeholders. We don't know 100% for sure what the scenario was.
Yeah, but even then, I mean, you're not following standard practices, right? So usually in a case like that, if you get a prototype delivered from a vendor, say, you receive it, it goes into quality checks it, validates it, and says, this is what this product is, and this is what it doesn't have. It doesn't, it fails in these instances before somebody, picks it up and puts it on screen.
Oh,
Right?
absolutely.
So if somebody was to say that they didn't like your game because they didn't like the gameplay or the looks, that's one thing. But if your game still had, placeholders from mobile games, that would be something completely different, right? It's a different critique.
Well, 100%, and that's but the failing in that case, I think, is more on Tommy and in television than the developers themselves. If that was the scenario, if the developers said, no, this game's complete, here, pay us our money, then the fault is all on the developer. And I don't actually blame in television that much, except for lying about what happened. Like, for example, not for example, but
you can blame them, and let me just interject here real quick. You can blame them for accepting it as good, but that would also tell you they don't have a quality department, right? Because
not
you
necessarily.
receive the game, right? Or you receive a product. You have to validate it as good before you pay your invoice. You just don't, say, okay, this is fine. In this case, it would have fell to, I guess John Alvarado, because he's the head of that department. But it's just odd to see something like this.
See, in Battletank's case, the development contract they would have had with the developers would almost certainly have a clause that said all IP is original to them or properly licensed. And so as a producer, you basically trust that. Unless you have reason to doubt that, you pretty much trust that, because think about it, if they really had 50 games in development and they were checking them all through, you can't check every single art asset whether it it belonged to something else. It's just too much time to go and check that. So at some level, you've got to trust that the developers know what they're doing and didn't lie to you.
I see.
Yeah, so in that case, I would excuse John Alvarado for letting those assets through. If that's what happened, if the developer said, this is the game, it's complete, here you go. What Intellivision did wrong was how they managed the fallout. They kind of did these shady removals and obfuscation and then re-uploads and tried to redo history by saying, oh, these were always placeholders. We knew this all along. It's like, no, you didn't. You let that through. And all you had to do is say, look, the developers used the wrong stuff. We didn't notice. We've corrected it. Done. Story's over. And I wouldn't blame them. I'd say, yeah, that's fair enough, and you reacted well. But no, they couldn't admit that something went wrong.
Yeah. I mean, what makes this company so entertaining is that you never know what to expect. Like right now, right? Have you ever seen an investor and a super fan who idolizes the president test software for a console before? Of course not. It's ridiculous, right? I mean, it's just ridiculous. But how do you think they're doing on the back end? I mean, why? I mean, this whole thing is just doesn't make sense to anybody, right? And the back end that you saw, how did you feel about what you saw that they put out so far?
You mean in terms of these test units or
Yes.
before that?
Yeah.
It's hard to say. Like, I'm more willing to give them the benefit of the doubt that the system actually works. It has the firmware's okay, the back end works. They can download games, they can buy games. I'm willing to believe that all actually works. It's probably not very robust. It's probably not very well tested, and there's quite certainly a lot of bugs in there. But I'd be willing to believe that it exists, it works. You could buy the thing off a retail shelf and it would pretty much do what it's advertised to do. How many games are complete? Probably not many. I'd venture maybe a dozen. Could be a couple more, but I kind of doubt it. But It's a thing. I don't think it's faked. I don't think DJC and Mike Mullis are pretending that they're actually playing it and testing it. But it's sort of irrelevant in a way. Like all of my criticisms about the system, in fact, they're not about the system. They're about the company, and they're about the economics of the situation.
Yes.
And whether the system is good or not, or the games are complete or not, is irrelevant. It doesn't matter. It could be the best system ever with fantastic games. Nothing's going to change the situation they're in.
Yes, I mean they're in dire need of money, and their reputation isn't getting any better. I mean, what makes this whole thing a mystery is basically you have an infomercial, right? Every Wednesday, today that we're shooting this, and that infomercials basically everybody's thinking it's going to be shown to other investors, other potential investors. Tommy has actually resurfaced. I don't know if you knew this or not. He's been making the rounds out there in backgammon tournaments or whatever, and he hasn't spoken to his friends, the YouTubers, which is kind of odd, right? But from what you've seen, right, what they say is they have about 3,000 to 6,000 units that they have to fulfill as far as back orders. We don't know the exact number in order to fulfill, their contractual obligations. From what you've seen, how much money do you think they need to just get there? I mean, forget about a retail launch, just to get these pre-orders done.
It's a good thing that you split the two because they're completely different scenarios. The retail launch, I can get into it more later, but that's off the table. That's dead in the water. It's not going to happen. Fulfilling the pre-orders, I mean, I guess there's a chance. More likely they'll just spit out a couple of hundred units. But let's say it was 3,000 pre-orders that they're going to fulfill. Okay, so there's two different scenarios even there. And they have vastly different outcomes. One is that they just make that many units. They make 3,000 units. The other is that that's the first step in a larger production run. So when they had the ARC deal and they were going into production, a year ago, it was supposedly for 100,000 unit quantity. That order would be for 100,000 units. So they would pay ARC, or they would commit to ARC that many units that would be made. And so the pre-orders would come off the line as the start of that process. Now, that's a huge difference because then you get the quantity costings for all of your components and running the lines. Now, that is, well, let's say they still had that and they were going to make or commit to 100,000 units. The costs involved, Tommy had said it was about $250K to set up the production run. So you've got that. 3,000 units, I'd estimated between 160 and 180 per unit at that level of production. I've been told that's pretty much right. And it might even be a little bit higher now with inflation. So let's say 180 is a pretty safe guess at a minimum. So you're looking at about, between that and the setup costs, about 800 grand to manufacture, raw manufacturing costs. And then you've got 300 grand from that you'll have to pay to Sudesh, $100 per unit for 3,000 units.
Yep.
And then Republic, you'll need to pay them about 135 grand based on their 15% revenue share. So you're looking at about 1.2 million that they'll have to spend to get those 3,000 units out the door. But then remember, they're going to collect $200 per unit from the customer to fill the rest of their pre-order purchase.
Yes.
So, yeah, so out of that 1.2 million, they get about half back. So they're going to be out of pocket about 600 grand or 600 grand further into debt by doing that. So that's the calculation. They would need 1.2 million up front to fund it, and after that, they'll get 600 grand of that back. So it just pushes them further back into the red by doing it. But that's the best case scenario. That's the scenario if they've done 100,000 unit order. to do that, they need 15 million to commit to that, right? Now, you may say, well, what about their manufacturing credit? They had a line of that with ARC. They've spoken about other manufacturers maybe giving them that. That's all well and good. But the way they work, manufacturing lines of credit, you have to have collateral for that.
That's
And if you
right.
don't have actual collateral, you put up purchase orders. And they have to be binding purchase orders so that the manufacturer knows a month later they're going to get that money back because the
Yes,
retailers will pay in television.
absolutely. I'm glad you're
Yeah.
getting into the weeds of this thing, because the other thing is that, and this has actually been publicly said, that the board is refusing to give them any more money, right? And we know exactly why that is. But I mean, the one thing that Amico supporters never talk about is that two people in here are worth hundreds of millions of dollars, right? They could fund this thing in 24 hours if they wanted to, but they don't. And they've actually said, you get no more money. Go get the money from wherever you want, but we're not giving you a nickel. They paid themselves. We don't know what the additional compensation that all these guys gave themselves in quarter one, right? That's not going to be known, I don't know, ever, right? So we're kind of...
It's very telling that all of the previous money that they put in since the very earliest days over the last 2 years, I think it is, all the money they have put in has all been put in as debt. They haven't put in more equity. And that's because they know the risk is too high and the debt is far less risky than equity.
Yes, and that's the reason I want to keep talking about this. I was surprised, when you get in the weeds of this stuff, you think that everybody knows about the Amico, but the fact is, it's a very small group of people that know about this stuff. So there's a lot more people out there that don't know. And the only way they're going to get this, if the board's not going to give them any more money, is they need somebody out there, whether it's the public or a whale or somebody, to come in and dump the $15 million. And most likely they're looking at Joe Public, right? To go in there, hey, we're going to do another Kickstarter, another round of investing, whatever the hell
their
that is.
their options are running out. I mean, Start Engine proved that there's not that appetite anymore. Republic was a slightly different scenario because it was a revenue share. You didn't get the financials of the company. You didn't know what was actually in the background happening and their cost structures. That happened in Start Engine. The investors looked at it and they said, no, thank you. They talk about the haters were posting nonsense on the comment page. That's irrelevant. Real investors would have just ignored that. And I did a time analysis on when those comments were posted. The comments initially were from actual investors with the green tick. They were asking the hard questions. They were getting terrible answers from Nick Richards. That all happened, and the influx of cash had petered out completely. It had stalled completely before the haters came in making stupid comments. So they really can't blame that. The investors were savvy enough to know this is a terrible investment.
Yes. And, I don't know if you've gotten to look at the infrastructure of the company, before they had all these problems, right? But it's notable how many people had high salaries and also had other jobs. My question has always been were those companies, and I don't know, right? This is pure speculation on my part, not financial advice, not legal advice, just supposition. But wouldn't it be interesting, right, if you worked for the company and then you also, I don't know, had a consulting firm who also charged the company money for services? I mean, that sometimes happens, right? But we're not going to know for sure until everything's said and done.
Even in the financials, there were it was 1 or 2 million in like consulting fees over the years, and they're really not delineated who they were paid to, what they're for. So you just don't know. It's hard to cast aspersions without evidence.
Yes,
but it's possible. You can definitely say that it is possible that kind of thing went on.
I mean, because you look at, for example, the marketing of this company. Who was doing the marketing? The fans. The fans were doing the marketing, and you had somebody being paid $150,000 for what? I mean, I couldn't
More
find the
than one
word.
person. There were
Yeah,
multiple marketing people there.
yeah.
As well as like not itemized, but in the financial, the line items for marketing expenses on top of the salaries for it.
Yes,
So,
and we still don't know what they were because
mm,
they never produced a demo unit, that you could put out there in GameStop. I mean, it's just really, really interesting. But without all this ordeal, like I tell people, I wouldn't be here, right? I
mm.
wouldn't have a channel and I wouldn't have anything to talk about. Let me ask you, talking about Tommy Tallarico, if you have three adjectives to describe him, which would they be?
I'd say argumentative, definitely. He could not let anything go. He had to have the last word and argue every point. Egotistical, obviously. I think even his supporters have to admit that. And deceitful. It's got to be said. He was a very deceitful person, and we find out more and more things he was deceitful about.
Well, I don't know if we're going to see him on tonight's show, but I mean, if he's out there, having a good time with his friends, he might show up. I don't know. Maybe give an update on the refunds, or
Yeah.
maybe give a pep talk to the investors. But you know what? It's something that is more common, and this is something we hadn't talked about before. But I don't know if you've been following up the arcade one up, uh, you know, uh, machines. But there you have another situation where you have people in companies wanting to be on camera, wanting to be on YouTube, which is the worst thing in the world. I mean, and this
Yeah.
is something that Nick Richards was on with Tony. Tommy's out doing interviews, and you have the right to remain silent. And it seems that a lot of people, especially when they're doing these things, they put their words on the screen and they engage with people when it's completely unnecessary. And that's why marketing is and PR is
Mm.
such a big deal.
Absolutely. I mean, you look at that. I've forgotten the company's name, but they were a custom PC builder, and they sponsored a lot of YouTubers.
Oh, yes, I remember hearing about that. I can't remember the
Yeah,
name.
and the guy just had a rant on screen against one of their affiliates who was promoting their computers, and that affiliate hadn't really sold many for them. You know, they were a fairly low viewer
Hmm.
channel. And the guy basically said, "We're not going to send you the computer we promised you because you haven't got enough viewers and you're not selling." And that one move, it was just like a off the cuff thing during a stream he was on, because this guy's a bit of an egotistical guy as well. He made it all about himself. And anyway, that one move destroyed the entire company. Like within a couple of weeks, the company was dead.
Yeah.
It's
Let,
crazy.
let me ask you, do you think Tommy retired himself, or do you think he was retired?
All word coming out from people behind the scenes is that he was retired, that
Yeah.
he was pushed out, definitely. And there were basically two factions within the company, one that supported Tommy and one that didn't.
Yeah. I mean, once
Yeah,
you got the money in there and you saw how the stock market was going, and I keep telling this to people, and they don't like to hear it, but the only smart move is not to dump any more money into this. That's as much as I like
absolutely.
a wood grain, it doesn't make financial sense. All right, here's the last couple of questions for you. 20 years from now, how would you describe the Amico Wars to your kids,
Boy,
to your grandkids, to whoever?
I think it was a bizarre period when what is objectively just this little harmless retro gaming toy. And normally it'd slip by with no notice, as much notice as you'll give like the latest flashback console or something. Somehow it took on these insanely disproportionate importance to both lovers and detractors of the system. Like beyond all sense and reason, it's just bizarre on both sides, and I'm totally guilty of the latter.
Yeah,
You know,
it could have been a combination of the pandemic and Tommy Tallarico, right? And people
yeah,
being
look,
stuck at home. I don't know.
yeah, probably that, and it's hard to explain really, but it was just this catalyst, I guess, that sparked fire. But the weird thing is that overall, like we're in it, so it feels important to us. But
Yeah.
overall, it's just a weird little nerd out that the wider world couldn't care less about.
Yeah.
They don't give a shit. Even the gaming industry as a whole couldn't
Yeah.
care less. Like no one's reporting on it. Like
No.
IGN's not reporting and saying, "Oh, please, someone save the Amico." No one really cares. And I mean, and
Yeah.
that's incredibly bad news for Amico. At least if the drama had stirred up massive interest, but it didn't. It was just a big meh.
Yeah. It died up. It's dying out with a whimper. Well, let me
Yeah.
ask you about yourself finally. Crossover role for initiative. What is this game about? This new game that you're working on?
It was just a crazy little idea I had and snowboarding into a game. I was looking at a character sheet from a role-playing game, like a Dungeons and Dragons game, right?
Hmm.
And I thought that kind of looks like the map of like a game, a tower defense game, like the little squares where your statistics are held and things like that. I thought they kind of look like towers that would attack monsters and monsters would try and kill them.
Hmm.
And that was what the whole game is based on. It's a really strange game. So you have your character sheet, and it's literally what I said. The monsters come in, the little pixel monsters coming from a computer world into your desk that you're sitting at in a 3D desk,
Yeah.
and they're attacking your paper character sheet. And so they walk up and they burn or slash or whatever at your the parts of your character sheet. So they attack your spells, and they can destroy what spells you have, so you can't cast them anymore. Or
Hmm.
they can attack your intelligence, and that reduces your effectiveness, to cast spells.
Okay.
And you've got to defend your sheet. You've got to kill all these little pixel monsters. And to do that, you can cast spells and hit them with weapons. But to power those attacks, you play a little match 3 game on the side, like a Candy Crush game.
Oh, okay. Okay.
Yeah, so you've got all your dice. Role-playing games have special dice that are like 4-sided, 8-sided, 20-sided. They're all weird shapes.
Yeah.
And so you've got a dice tray with a grid of those dice, and they're like the Candy Crush candies. And you've got to match 3, and when you match them, you get those dice into your inventory, into your stock, and you use those to cast your spells and use your attacks. So you're kind of playing 2 games at once, and you've got to
Yeah.
juggle like 2 parts of your brain to do this little puzzle game on the side and then attack the monsters on the other side. But it's all in real time.
Oh, that's awesome.
So it's like the most frantic, hardcore match 3 game ever because it's all done in real time.
Well, we look forward to it. I want to thank you for your time. I want to thank you for being with us during the Amico Wars and enlightening us. And most of all, I really want to thank you for inspiring the old man cringe community and showing them that you can still do something, after 40. It doesn't have to stop there. You can still be a game developer, even if you're an old man cringe.
Absolutely.
All right, guys.
Anyone can do it.
Yes. Thank you so much, Gaterooze. I'm going to put links down below to all his stuff. Go follow him. Let me tell you, Ampersat is a great game. Play it. Thank you so much. Have a great one. Have a great evening.
Thanks, mate. You too. Pleasure talking to you.
All right. Take care.
New videos every Monday and Sunday. Thank you for joining me on another episode of the Gen X Gamer. Remember to like and subscribe, click that notification bell, and remember, never ever be afraid to be happy. I'll catch you on the next one. Take care.